Hi, I'm Ahava Leibtag. Today I'm joined by my friend, Kristina Schiller Chaki, Director of Content Strategy at Sheppard Pratt, to talk about the latest in healthcare content. You've got questions, we've got answers. Let's get into it. How you doing?
I am doing great. How are you, Ahava?
It's great to see you. You look great.
Oh,
You spearheaded a marketing first approach to recruitment at Sheppard Pratt, creating employer branding, employee personas, focus groups, and content for staffing needs during a nationwide healthcare labor shortage. Can you walk us through one moment when that approach really paid off? Maybe a surprising insight or a campaign that changed the game? And I just want to say this is like a huge issue for our audience because more and more marketing is being pulled into employee recruitment efforts as the healthcare labor shortage continues. So really excited to hear what your insights were and, something that stood out to you about the whole process.
So I probably like every single other healthcare organization out there, at Sheppard Pratt, we were facing workforce shortages, and we are extra facing that because we are strictly behavioral healthcare. So we're looking for people with a super niche focus. And so we had been getting after request from our recruitment team, and I sat down and I was like, how are we going to tackle this? So we actually hired someone who is a bridge between recruitment and marketing. She is amazing. She's a recruitment marketing manager. And when we brought her on, we sat down and we talked about how are we going to address this. And so we really looked at things through that marketing lens, like you just said. And so we developed all of the things that you would normally think about for a marketing campaign, but solely focused on recruitment. And so one of those first things that we developed was our employer brand, which for us, it's my why. So we have people talking about discovering their why at Sheppard Pratt, living their why at Sheppard Pratt. And I think the coolest thing for me is seeing that adoption both internally and externally. And so people have really embraced it. I hear it come up naturally in conversation all the time when people are talking about my why for being here at Sheppard Pratt is XYZ. So it's such a natural fit for our organization. But then I think the other thing that's super cool is the extensibility of it and the way that we've been able to take it from this driving concept for the campaign and take it into our other channels. So for us, social media is one of the biggest places that we're using the My Why campaign. So we've got a video series that's coming out on a pretty regular basis across our social channels now, where we have employees talking about living their why, discovering their why, and doing it all at Sheppard Pratt to really drive home why this is the place for them to be. We've even worked it into our new employee orientation. I sat in on a new employee orientation the other week, and there's this reflective moment at the beginning of it where the audience is encouraged to think about what's your why for being here, what is going to be your why for showing up every
That's
day.
beautiful. Make buttons that say, ask me about my why.
I love that idea. Okay, we might actually steal that.
Yeah, no, that's great. So I want to seize on something that you said because I think it's really critical. You talked about how Sheppard Pratt is behavioral health. So you have niche kinds of people that you hire for, but you have a recruitment marketing manager, which I think is an unusual role. Like that's the first time I've ever heard that title in healthcare for 20 years. And I think it's really necessary in today's marketplace. But how would you go about convincing somebody in a typical healthcare services setting where it's not niche and they're just looking for what you would say the classic healthcare professionals are? How would you say to them, this role actually can really change what it is that you're doing, how you're recruiting, and more importantly, retention and quality?
And I think the retention piece is one that we're really drilling down on now through Maria and her role as the
Yeah,
recruitment
yeah,
marketing
yeah.
manager. I would encourage them to sit down and look at, honestly, the analytics of the problem. Where are you seeing these shortages? What are you doing now? What's working? What's not working? And really figure out where can you fill those gaps. And I mean, yes, behavioral healthcare, it's niche, and I think we're up against some additional challenges to
Sure.
traditional healthcare or med surge. But I think looking at what are those ways that you can create these audience personas, just like you do in traditional
Targeting.
marketing.
Yep.
You can do that in med surge. You can do that in behavioral healthcare because even within Sheppard Pratt, we've got hospitals, we have community programs, we have schools. So those are a whole range of types of roles that we have to fill. Just like in traditional med surg, you have nurses, you have doctors, you have advanced practice professionals, but then you also have people who are administrative. They're making the programs run behind the scenes.
Right.
So
You have therapists. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you're
Ad
running
folks.
into those same differences in personas. So I think it's such an applicable role, really, in any organization. It's really about just like in traditional marketing, knowing your audience and knowing how to speak to them.
Yeah. I think it will be interesting to watch how people who specialize in recruitment change their focus into maybe a more of a hybrid marketing recruitment focus rather than just a recruitment HR employee focus. Because I think knowing how to get people is just as important as getting them.
Like, yeah.
You need both sides of that. You need to understand like your audience, what they're looking for, what you're looking for, and how to bridge those gaps. That's really fascinating.
Yeah, and we've even done workshops with our recruitment team at this point. So, we've got Maria who sort of bridges between marketing and recruitment, but then the social media specialist on our team and I have gone in and we've done how to use social media to advance your goals and to attract candidates workshops with them, which has been super fun.
Yeah. And they probably take to it really well because I would think that like it's exciting for them to find new avenues to grow the channels that they advertise on.
Absolutely. Yeah. And seeing the progression of how they're all using LinkedIn and using their social media channels. It's just so cool to watch.
That's awesome. That's really fun. You've built both consumer facing and clinician publications and led holistic campaigns across service lines. How do you navigate the balance between patient-centric messaging and clinician engagement in your content strategy? This is huge right now, especially with AI search and figuring out like, what are the LLMs going to pick up on and how are they going to feed the information to people if they have both physician-facing content to pull from and patient-centered content to pull from?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And AI's involvement in content and content strategy right now is it is a wild road following it, and it's changing so fast and so consistent.
I know. Somebody just asked me a question. I was like, well, I can tell you what I thought yesterday and I can tell you what I'm thinking today, but I can't tell you what tomorrow's going to look like.
Exactly. And like, I think I've even seen you post about this before, that at the end of the day, focusing on creating content that is meaningful and that answers questions is what's so important 100%. Because the algorithm is just consistently changing. So all we can do is just, keep putting out content that meets a need and that answers people's questions. So
it's really true. It's the answering people's questions. I also think the definition of what we consider a fabulous content experience has really changed. So in the beginning, it was just being able to get online and communicate with people. And then it was, blogs, and now it's videos and interactive things. And I just wonder sometimes really what is the most meaningful content experience? It's giving people a piece of information to move forward. And I'm not 100% sure they really care about how it's delivered, which is specific to healthcare. I wouldn't say that for entertainment content or travel content, but I really think that in healthcare, people, they just are so desperate for meaningful, factually based information.
I actually work on content for consumers, clinicians, and donors too. And so for each of these, we've got a content strategy for each of these different audiences that they ladder back up to our overarching organizational strategic goals. They align with our annual plan every year. So I'm revisiting them on an annual basis. Each of our content strategies is segmented out by audience, but each of them, we have key objectives. We have demographics, psychographics, what are their motivators, and then content pillars within each of these strategies. So, what are the pillars? What are the formats that we're talking to these audiences in? What are the frequencies with which we're communicating? And then I use that framework. And so we can be super intentional about what we're saying, when we're saying it, who we're saying it to, where we're saying it.
So does but I assume each publication has its own content strategy, right?
Absolutely.
So when I used to do workshops and people would get confused about personas, I would assign teams of people to create personas. And then I would have them design a Pinterest board for that particular persona. And then we would put the Pinterest boards up on all the walls of the room. It looked like we were trying to solve a murder. And I would circle, look, this doctor is interested in this patient is interested in this. It became a really interesting exercise in understanding overlap. But you're talking about three very different audiences, different publications that have different content strategy objectives. Like, how do you find the overlap? And do you rewrite the content? Do you just change the language level? Like, how do you manage that part of it? It's like a puzzle.
Yeah, it is. And first of all, I love your analogy about the solving a murder, because I am watching Scandal for the first time right now. And the whole put all the pictures up on the wall. What I try and do is map out, ideally over the course of a year, what are we going to talk about for each of these different publications? What makes sense? What are the motivators throughout these different times of year? So we have a 4 times a year donor publication that goes out. So how do these align with, our calendar year-end campaign, Giving Tuesday, whatever other fundraising efforts that we have going on? But when we can we take a topic and spread it out across these different audiences, but then talk about it in different ways. So let's say it's treatment-resistant depression. So these are people who they've tried three or more different medications for depression. They've probably tried therapy also, and they're just not getting better. So this is a big percentage of the population. A lot of people with depression have tried three or more medications. I know when I was,
Sure.
figuring out medication for my anxiety, I think it was the third one that finally was the one that worked for me.
That was the third one for me also. I think I'm
Yeah,
thinking back on it now. One made me gain a ton of weight, and I was like, I'm not taking this. It wasn't helping anyway.
one made me break out in hives. I would like full body itching, and I was like, nope, we are going to have to stop this one right now.
I do think one of the really interesting things about behavioral health is that it is such a throwing a dart at a dartboard. And I think people get frustrated. And I always tell friends, like, you're going to be so happy when you figure out the right cocktail, because you're going to feel better, but you have to have a lot of patience. So going back to that topic. So this is what basically drug-resistant depression looks like, right?
Exactly. So for consumers, what is it? You're not alone, and here are the steps that you can take next. Hope is here, and we can help you tackle this in these different ways. So educational, but also here's how we as Sheppard Pratt can help you on your journey. For donors, what are you funding when it comes to advancing this field, helping people get back to feeling like themselves, feeling better? And for us, it's research that is really focused on treatment-resistant depression. We're doing a couple different trials right now with psychedelics. And could that be something that
huge? Yeah.
I know, and like how cool. That's one of my favorite things to write about right now. But then for clinicians, psychiatrists, it's what are truly those latest clinical developments? What are we seeing in these clinical trials that we're running? So it's the same overarching topic, but you've got different motivators and different objectives for each of these audiences. So how can we write or create content about this topic in a way that is going to resonate with all of these different people? Taking that approach, I can sit down with one expert one time, but get all of this rich information.
I agree with you 100%. I also think that the outgrowth of those kind of interviews can often lead you to patient stories, interviewing researchers, and you can really create like an entire, almost like a pillar page of content that helps your SEO, helps your AI. It's great. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Kristina, you have the unique position of having worked both the agency and health system sides of content.
Yes.
How have those perspectives influenced the way you approach content strategy today?
Yeah, and I mean, I gotta say, having had the chance to work both agency and on the health system side, like what an unparalleled experience, because you get to tackle all these problems from so many different angles. But on the agency side, you learn so much about different audiences and different industries in a way that you don't necessarily get to when you are working in a health system, when you're working for a company with a singular goal.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think you get a lot of experience working with people in other disciplines too. So you have the people who are super niche in SEO, web development, email, creative, whatever it might be. And you get that access in a way that you don't necessarily get when you're working for a hospital or a health system. So, I mean, just a great way to dip your toes in a lot of different buckets. And again, you get to look at all of these other industries that maybe they have more funding than healthcare does, because we're often working with limited budgets. I know, Sheppard Pratt is a nonprofit. We don't have just
You're bootstrapping it.
Yeah, we're bootstrapping it.
Yeah.
And healthcare is often seen as kind of behind the ball when it comes to advanced.
I actually want to talk about that, because it's actually, I have to be honest, I've had a lot of exposure to a lot of other industries, and I go to other industry events and I go to sessions at content marketing conferences with other industries. And in a lot of ways, if an industry is not regulated, it has a chance to be more innovative. But if it's regulated, like financial services, for example, or pharma, they can't be as creative as we all would love to think that they're being. You know what I mean? So that healthcare is behind. I think we're just slow.
Yeah.
I mean, like we're slow to adapt to change, and we're also held, I think, hostage by the physicians and their need to run things a certain way. I think that's also a huge part of it. Not that they're wrong, just that they have a certain specific way of the way they want things done. And that sometimes comes into conflict with patient experience. Online scheduling is a perfect example, right?
Totally. Yes.
You can online schedule anything at this point, but you cannot online schedule like an ENT appointment.
Which is wild to me. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And that's because releasing their schedules puts doctors at a weird position because maybe they're not seeing the right patient. Maybe they're not the right physician to see that patient. Maybe that patient shouldn't be seen at that moment. Maybe that patient needs more testing before they come in. And so it is more complicated. And I understand that. But I also think I just think that a lot of times we say we're behind, and I'm not 100% sure that we're behind. I just think we're very slow and our hands are tied behind our back sometimes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I totally know what you mean. And I think that we've also got regulations like HIPAA that are
Yeah.
impacting what we can say. And in addition to working
And
on
what we can analyze and what data we're allowed to have. I mean, it's huge, that regulation. Yeah.
I mean, we had to completely change our tech stack and our analytics in light of everything that came out a couple of years ago. We have some limitations that I think other industries don't. And seeing what those other industries can do and how we could take that and adapt it to healthcare, knowing that, sure, we have these regulations, but what are some workarounds or what are some other ways that we can approach this problem and still get to a good solution?
Yeah. I agree with you. I also think that healthcare has a huge educational part of it, that like our best writers and editors at Ahava Media Group were former teachers. I mean, like they just get it. They can break down information. They understand how to communicate it. I don't think a lot of other industry, maybe financial services or pharma, but I'm thinking about, like for travel, for example, or food, it's not the same kind of education. You know what I mean? It's not life or death or your money, which is, very important to people probably after their health. It's really more like not entertainment content, but somewhere in between those two things. Like I want to find out, like, do you have a king size bed in a hotel? It's a lot different than finding out like what your approach is to taking out an acoustic neuroma. So I just think that's also a huge part of why sometimes we feel constrained, is that so much education has to happen before the creative can happen.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And when I think about, I want to get you to this call to action, this CTA, but there's so much that I need to be able to tell you and have you ingest and make you feel comfortable with what it is you're signing up for before you get there. We have different barriers to goals than other industries do.
I think you're right about that. It's true. I want to ask you one other question, and it comes into the whole mental health stigma part of what's going on in our society in general and how it's gotten a lot better, but it's still held back. What do you think somebody in your position can do to influence that kind of societal, I don't know, stigma? I can't have a better word for it, because people are much more comfortable talking about therapy, talking about the medications that they're on, but there's still this feeling of like, there's something wrong with me, even though like, everyone is on.
Everyone I know is, either they're in therapy or they're on medication,
struggling,
or like everyone's experiencing it. And so one of the things that we've been doing a lot recently is, aside from, we are always running campaigns on social media, on our various channels about getting people to talk up or speak up, leave messages of hope, whatever it might be, just normalizing the conversation as much as we can. But then also, how do we tie it back to you as the person? Someone who's impacted by this, whether it's you, whether it's your loved one, your child. Make it personal for people and really remind them it's not abnormal. I mean, we've all seen the 1 in 5, the 1 in 4 statistic. Everyone knows 5 people.
It's 4 in 4. It's 4 in 4 at this point. I meet a lot of people and I'm like, it's medication time for you, honey.
And there's no shame in it whatsoever. But also therapy, who doesn't benefit from therapy?
I know. One of the things I always tell people when they say like, I don't want to be on drugs for the rest of my life, or I don't, I say to them, I wear glasses. Should I feel bad that my eyes don't work the way, let's say, like a healthy person or a normal person's eyes work? Should a diabetic feel guilty about taking insulin? You know what I mean? Like,
oh, it's just something that you need to be able to live your life. Yes.
I think it's really interesting. And I like that idea of like, it's personal. I also think there are really important messages. You don't have to suffer. Don't have to suffer.
Treatment is available, and their mental health treatment is so different than what people picture from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
It's so true.
Light years beyond it. There's so many
really good point.
There's so many different ways to address every kind of problem. So if you don't want to try medication, there's so many different types of therapy.
Thank you so much for joining me, Kristina. This was a great conversation. Thanks to our viewers for joining in. I hope you got the answer that you needed today. If you have a burning question, put it in the comments or email me at ahava.leibtag@Ahava Media Group. sheppardpratt.com. I will see you next time. Thank you, Kristina.
Thank you, Ahava.
Want to dive deeper into this conversation? Check out the link in the comments below for the full interview. See you next time.